Well, Charles, now that everybody has finally admitted that Joe Biden is an incompetent idiot, we need to figure out this Autopen identity. How are you doing today, Charles?
I'm great, Jason. I'm in a lovely place here in Indonesia,
Wow.
and new hotel that I found. So it's a delight to be here. Simple connection from Penang through Kuala Lumpur down here. Um, yeah, on the subject of the Autopen, I think if we were to go back over the filmography or the podcastography or whatever you call it, our various shows, we were on this before he was selected by the Democrats in their ridiculous primary process in 2020. We questioned Joe Biden's um, legitimacy,
Yeah.
ability to actually hold high office years ago.
Yeah.
And this latest thing, sadly, my father had prostate cancer. That's not what killed him, but he explained to me that it's actually quite common, and that if you stay on top of it,
Yeah. Quite
you're
treatable.
likely to die. Well, you're likely to die of something else. So for Biden is chronologically 82, mentally probably two, if that. But to come out of the blue, and I would argue in an effort to try to get sympathy for this bumbling fool, and say, "Oh, we missed this." I mean, come on now. That's ridiculous. And you know how me and I'm not even. I didn't even like watching Doctor Kildare, let alone do I hold myself out as a medical expert. But
Dr.
even
Zhivago
I,
makes you cringe.
I liked House though. Anyway, but but the idea that they would now figure this out,
Yeah, it
um,
doesn't it
and so
doesn't survive the smell test. This guy's one of the most medically monitored people alive, isn't he?
right, and so we really do need to go back to base principles. I mean, in a company, when people, myself included, yell and scream about General Electric, it's actually in a company like in a publicly traded company, the ultimate authority is not the CEO, it's the board of directors and really the shareholders when it gets to tough votes. But when it comes to our democracy, here we have the pontificator in chief, who I think stands revealed Barack Obama as being a complete loser, and not even remotely. He started out, I'd say, in November of 2008. He was the walking incarnation of Muhammad, Jesus Christ, and Buddha. I mean, for what happened, and he was he could do no wrong. But now I think the long track record of deceit paints him and should give focus upon him as a bitter, nasty, and singularly unaccomplished person. And I think through. We opened talking about Biden's health condition. Obamacare, Joe Biden said, was a big fucking deal. Yeah, it was a big fucking deal for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
What it did is it forced all Americans to purchase an insurance product that we didn't need. What we need, I think, in this country, and again, I'm no health expert, but what we need is insurance for all for catastrophic outcomes that represent a small percentage of the likely outcomes. Such a scheme that could work. But when you set up these plans that require men to cover themselves for pregnancy and nuns to cover themselves for maternity, I mean, it was a ridiculous idea. The cost of it is extremely high. And what we really needed to do was reform using technology the ways in which care is administered and strengthen the bond between the frontline providers of medical care and patients.
There's
So we
another
ended
problem,
up,
Charles. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think you're on a right path here. But the thing is, you got to think about it in terms of auto insurance, right? Like if I crashed into someone and said, "Oh, sorry, Mercedes driver, my insurance only covers Fords, so I can't pay you for this accident." That's what we have with medical insurance today. You have to match your insurance to a doctor. You don't know what it is. You go. I had an
right,
infection on my finger one time, and I went to the hospital, and they did something to it with just like one pill, and talking to the guy for 5 minutes, and charged me $4,000. So you should
right,
know what the costs of these things are really really what Obamacare should have done was regulated the insurance industry and said, if you're going to be a licensed medical insurance provider, you have to be able to provide coverage in every state in the United States, and people just choose, like you do with your car, how much coverage you have, what your deductible is, and how much premium you pay. And if you're a doctor who accepts insurance, you just take the person's insurance. If a doctor visit is $150, the insurance pays whatever it pays, and that's it. It's like a puzzle right now. People can't figure it out.
Well, and beyond that, you should, in the private sector, if you ran a business where you sit down, I don't tell you what the price of it is, and you order your meal. And
Right.
if I don't like the cut of your jib or how you look or what you're wearing, I charge you $6,000
Right.
for the meal, and somebody else pays for it. Or if I do like you, it's free. I mean, you can't do that in the private sector. You have a price for a good or a service. It's a negotiated price. It's a market-tested price. If you try to sell stuff that's not of high quality for too high a price, you go out of business. There has to be that kind of valid price discovery. And don't tell me you can't do that today. I mean, look what is done with these gigantic, powerful AI programs. Don't tell me you shouldn't be able in this day and age to go across the country and say, all right, let's start by taking big cities where things are more expensive. And let's look at, how much did an appendectomy cost? How much did a tooth removal cost? How much did this cost?
Right.
And get some sense of what is a reasonable price, and not set, not attempt from Washington, D.C. or a state capital to say, you can only charge $600 for an appendectomy. No, you just say, look, here's the spectrum of what they cost. And, you behoove yourself to get out of New York if they're charging you $16,000 for something that you can get in Columbus for $6,000.
Well, not only that, you
$600.
just hit on something very important, Charles, because a government-regulated medical insurance industry could make a market where, look, if you're a doctor who wants to charge $16,000 for an appendectomy and someone has the money for it and doesn't want to deal with insurance, fine. This doctor just doesn't accept insurance. And
Right.
then there are doctors that do. And there's a range of prices. Even if you go to the supermarket in New York City,
Right.
you're going to have the same items at Whole Foods would be $1 more in New York than they are in Washington, D.C. or whatever. And that's reasonable. I guess the rent is higher or whatever. But the medical industry doesn't work like that at all. It's a total black bag when you go in there. You have no idea what it's going to cost. And they're getting you at a moment where you're desperate and you just have to buy it.
Right. And so, remember when they passed, when the Supreme Court, I think, erroneously ruled in a decision that we need to go back over, because when I read it closely back in, I think was it 2010 or 11? I forget when, 10, I guess. I think it was June 2010. It appeared to me as if it had been written to say that Obamacare was a tax and therefore couldn't, be lawful. But then they went through mental gymnastics to in the end say, no, it's okay. So I think that was a bad decision. Then you think about this idea that endless wars and regime change, first outside the country, but then later now, I think, inside the country, that's part of Obama's legacy. Perpetual deficits, that was Obama's legacy. The pace at which private sector jobs came back along the trajectory they'd been on under Bush and previously under Clinton and before that under Reagan was the most anemic recovery in modern history. And we're left with this gigantic bureaucracy, with a court system that is run amok, with the weaponization of the political system using government assets. These are all, and not to mention drone striking American citizens, evil as they might have been, with no due process. I mean, this is not a record that will stand the test of time. And I'm actually reminded that when I was first a very young punk in 1980, worried about whether Reagan would win, then excited that he did, the animosity against Reagan at the time, early when he won, was unbelievable. I mean, the opening presumption was much like, oh, Reagan's an idiot. He's an airhead. Was bedtime for Bonzo was his singular artistic achievement. He was governor, but he's a moron. Nancy's a kook. The animosity until he was shot. And then the failure to appreciate, the Tax Act of 1986 that he pulled off was pulled off at a time when the Republicans did not control the House. He achieved, until recently, the largest reform of the tax system ever attempted, with Tip O'Neill in the chair as Speaker of the House. I mean, that was a monument. At the end, perhaps he had Alzheimer's or something like it. But during his presidency, Reagan was vilified by the know-it-all pencil necks and that frequent the green rooms in Washington, D.C. and New York City. But then I'd say about 10 years after he left, people began to look at what he'd done, what the mess that he'd inherited, courtesy of Democrats and rhinos, both domestically and internationally, and the things that he managed to pull off with charm and grace. My particular, one of the things that I know it's a made-for-TV moment in a sense, but his Pointe-à-Hoc speech in Normandy, I think it was in 1984, was one of the most moving speeches that I've ever seen anybody give in modern history. I mean, it was really touching. It was not about him. He honored the men who had scaled those cliffs, and he had them right in front of him. I mean, it was incredible.
I remember.
So I hope what's happening here is this is now the beginning of the end for Obama, and certainly it's certainly the end for Biden. And I think we're probably and hopefully in a place, barring unforeseen circumstances, where we can finally get to the bottom of what really happened in 2008.
Let me just ask you something, Charles. Are you saying that Barack Obama, he's kind of like a reverse Ronald Reagan, because everybody was pissed off at Reagan when he was president and liked him later, and now Obama, everybody's finally realizing is a jackass?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
There you go.
And
I know what you're saying when you don't even say it.
You're horse whispering me. Anyway, I had on the displeasure of this flight, these flights yesterday, I had the opportunity to read in full this piece of garbage. And this is Bill Clinton. No, it's actually, a real title should be Full of Shitizen. I mean, it is really
just called Citizen.
My life after the White House.
After the White House, right? Citizen.
Yeah. Before the Big House. I mean, this is a book. It's like the Sherlock Holmes, the dog that didn't bark kind of thing. It's noteworthy for what's not in it. So what's not in it is any discussion of the role played by Doug Bann, who give him his due, he orchestrated the post-presidency. It was he who put together the idea of the Clinton Global Initiative. It was he who put together the idea of a bill charging extraordinarily high speaking fees. It was he who put together most of the business deals that made the Clintons rich. And it was he who was basically getting Bill Clinton, both Coke, the soft drink, and perhaps other types of Coke, not to mention hot and cold running bimbos around the world. So Doug Bann's name does not appear in this book.
That's conspicuous, isn't it?
Yeah. What I had hoped to see was a discussion of a more precise discussion of how Bill felt he had the running room to fly around the world, including in Epstein's plane, pretending that he was running the Clinton Foundation in New York without bothering to do any of the legal paperwork that's required. He actually says several times there, I incorporated the Clinton Foundation. There is no evidence of that. But what I was really hoping to see was some discussion of 2008. They do mention the June 7th meeting with Dianne Feinstein in the book, where they, in theory, smoked a peace pipe. From Barack Obama's book, he claims that Hillary laid into him in that meeting, and was mad at him, and it implies that she wanted to be the vice president. So that kind of stuff is not covered in Citizen, but it is covered in Barack Obama's book. And what's also not covered is the supposed memorandum of understanding. We found 4 versions of it so far that it attempted to regularize relations between the Clinton, in theory, charities and Hillary Clinton's position as Secretary of State under Obama. There's no discussion of that at all in Citizen, which is ridiculous. There's also a pointed exchange in, I think it was 2004, maybe it was earlier than that. It was 2001, where Bill had an opportunity to give a speech in China during the time that, this is Bill's accounting of it, when China had that spy plane. And in order to get the right to give that speech, he had to speak to Condi Rice. And he claims that he told her that, Condi being the Secretary of State under George W. Bush, he told her that you people bankrupted me when I was president, and I really need to make this speech. He says that in here. Now, wait a minute. That's just absurd. I mean, this guy needs a team of psychiatrists to look into him. I mean, the Republicans did bankrupt Clinton. Clinton got to power following an epic crime spree, beginning in Little Rock, maybe beginning in Oxford or even earlier, but an epic crime spree where he engaged in all kinds of shady dealings. We still don't know the truth of all that. And then when he got to office, before he went to Washington, D.C., he hooked up with Bob Barnett by, according to one account, in I think November or December of 1992, before he was even sworn in, to plan his post-presidency, i.e. how he would milk the office. To win the election in 92, he and Hillary created a war room, the first time that had ever been done and acknowledged publicly, where they targeted all their opponents. And then once he was in there, bodies started dropping like flies to suggest that Republicans bankrupted him. He bankrupted himself.
He's a mob boss, basically.
Right. Well, and more importantly, he's acknowledging that, when you're out fundraising for a charity, you probably have to disclose that you're bankrupt, right? I'm president. I've managed to
Is that important?
Technically, yeah, it's probably relevant. That you can't manage your personal finances, but please give me a whole bunch of money,
right?
For a charity to do whatever I want, anywhere I want around the world. I mean,
less than
it's just
10% of the proceeds go toward blowing hookers, so it's okay.
Right, but he has this way of arguing, which actually is a dangerous way to argue. When you say to yourself, I'm above reproach. Why? Because I've devoted my life to public service. Everyone else is chasing evil profit. And so I make a few mistakes here and there. On balance, there's been more good than harm. When you start thinking that way, you're going to make grievous errors. And that's the subject
Didn't he
of this
even say
guy.
that? More good than harm?
Yeah,
That's like his favorite thing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really regrettable. I like to play. I haven't played cards in a while because it's a big waste of time. But I used to like to play bridge, and specifically duplicate bridge, which is you get teams of players together, and in essence, you're ranked. You don't care about your results on their own. You care about your results versus everybody else. And this man has gifts. He was a great speaker, but what a waste. What a waste of a life. So many people harmed. His attitude is, it's not, I never am at fault for anything. Just look at all the good I aspired to do. I mean, it's really shameful. And this book should never have been published in the form that it was published because it's riddled with errors. And I think admissions of guilt and charity, fraud and corruption. So it's,
well, that's cool. You also had a lot of stuff, Charles, where Trump was tweeting all kinds of Hillary Clinton memes and stuff,
right.
Talking about Vince Foster, and people like, oh, he's tweeting conspiracy theories. He's posting, truthing conspiracy theories. But these are all things that really should be investigated, I think.
I'm sorry, the game of calling an alternative theory a conspiracy theory, that game's finished, okay? We said long ago that Joe Biden, remember in the first debate, Democratic debate in the 2019-20 cycle, Kamala Harris and the fake Indian. Stupid. Well, there were reports in even mainstream publications that Joe was going to abandon his campaign. It was such a bad performance. And I think that debate was in 2019 from memory, if not early. I think it was 19.
Yeah, it
It
was
was an
remarkably
atrocious.
early, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was an atrocious performance. Um, and so basically now we know, and unfortunately for the other side, they're not smart enough. Every time there's a bunch of tells. If Mark Zaid or Norm Eisen or Mark Elias, it's Mark Elias, I think, right? Or Andrew
Yeah.
Weissman
Oh yeah.
is yapping about anything,
Oh yeah. That's their
you
fake plan
know,
right there. Yeah.
or Abby Lowell, you know, you have them by the cojones. You know that you're right, right? And so
Yeah.
what they're doing, they're masters at playing. And Bob Bennett, or Bill or Bob Bennett, I think it was the lawyer brother. He wrote a book about the whole process of representing Bill through impeachment. And he says in that book, flat out, maybe he's lying, but he says in the book that his mission, told to him by either Bill or people close to Bill, was to delay any resolution of the Paul Jones matter until after the 1996. Yeah, that's it, Rob. Bob.
And you know, Stephen
After
Biss
the
was involved in
1996
that.
election.
Stephen
That's their
Biss was
game
on
plan. If
the.
they know something better.
Stephen Biss was involved in that case. He was on the Paula Jones side of it, which, if I'm correct, and Stephen Biss is a Lawfare operative, that's, control both sides of the caption. And Stephen Biss is a Lawfare operative. So there's so much depth to the just deception and coercion and craziness that's gone on for so long. Charles, I'm mindful of the time because we've only got 2 or 3 minutes left, and you had brought up something earlier about, Bill Clinton flying around with Epstein. Kash Patel and Dan Bongino were talking to, I think, Maria Bartiromo earlier today, and they're like, oh, trust me, I know suicides, and that Epstein, he definitely killed himself. Does anybody believe these two morons any longer after saying that, you think?
Well, again, I think on the question of who was after Epstein, I think the answer is it's likely the intelligence services of multiple countries, including the United States. But Israel would be a high candidate on the list. UK would be a high candidate
But to kill
on
him
the
or
list.
protect him and exfiltrate him from the prison, it seems
One
more
or the
likely
other.
that's what they did, yeah.
One or the other. But the point is that this is not a satisfactory explanation. And anytime somebody pulls I've been a prosecutor, I've been this, I've been that, you couldn't possibly understand me, that is just crap. And another thing I didn't like there was when Bongino said, you got to understand, we have a grading system of things that are important, up to a 9. Everybody else, beneath us, we only focus on the 10s. I listened to that and I said, do you realize how stupid you sound?
He is
because
stupid.
What you would do if you were trying to game that system is you just take something that is a 10 or a 15 and call it a 3 and put it over in Dubuque, Iowa, and just say, listen, you guys in Dubuque, why don't you study this while you're eating donuts for the next 10 years until the statute of limitations passes? That was weak. He claimed, on the other hand, that he's seen a report with new information on what really happened with the Russiagate hoax, and that's going to be out in a week or two. Okay, let's see it.
Yeah.
Let's see what you come up with.
I don't believe that. I really think they look stupid. I think they made Trump look stupid. I think both of those guys were terrible choices. I think there were a lot of other people. They should have made you the director of the FBI, Charles, and I could be the deputy. We'd have shut down all these crimes last week. I know you wouldn't want to do it. I know that. But seriously, though, I mean, look, either somebody's going to get in there and change the whole thing up and handle it seriously, or you get there and get sat down and somebody says, that plane you flying around on is going to crash with you in it if you don't play ball. And it seems like something like that happened because I don't know. I never had confidence in either of those two guys. I think that they're both involved, as I said, with Stephen Biss. Dan Bongino used Stephen Biss as his attorney, was definitely involved in Lawfare. So it's very appropriate that you brought up that Paula Jones case because, Charles, I'm seeing a lot of evidence that our government has been captured by organized crime. And I know people talk about that in a general sense, but this investigation that I've been doing and you've been helping me with to some extent into Letitia James and some of the really troubling facts that are coming to light. There are people who are saying, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. But, I put out a series of tweets today that include evidence. And I mean, this is evidence that's coming from filings made in court. There's a very strange occurrence where there's this probate filing from 1982 that has this judge, Cassandra A. Johnson, on the case. And this woman was born, I think, in 1981 or 1983. She's 43 right now. So I don't see how she could possibly be the judge with a case that supposedly happened in 1982. Now, it's possible. As I've said many times, I'm not an attorney. It's possible that there's something I don't understand about probate court, but I don't think that's it. We've found a lot of stuff about this guy, Thomas M. Rose.
Just on that one point, have you seen, no doubt, all the memes of baby Trump and baby this and baby that?
Yeah.
You should make baby judge.
I was looking into that. Someone's obviously got an app or something that does that. So, I mean, when I use, that's kind of like a ready-made AI, I guess, and I'm sort of doing it
custom,
from scratch. Yeah. So I don't know. We'll have to look into the baby AI, but we're going to take a journey now, Charles, into the First Amendment form. People who are subscribing to the show and sponsoring on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth are going to be able to join us. People who are already on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth are having an absolutely wonderful free ride during the time that Odyssey is reestablishing their payment system. And I don't mind at all. I'm happy to share these sponsor-exclusive videos with the people who've been sponsoring the show on Odyssey. But I did get a message from someone today wanting to sponsor on Odyssey and unfortunately can't accept new sponsors there. You can go to any of the other sponsorship channels, including crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com. And of course, now people can subscribe on X. If you're following me at JG_CSTT, you can subscribe and get access to the sponsor-exclusive videos. We'll be right back in like less than 5 minutes, Charles. So stay with us, everybody. We've got a lot more.